Hello, it's Book Chick again, and I am here to film a quick video before I head off to work. So I'm not centered. This video is books to read when you need a good cry. I just thought this would be a good video for this time of year, as everyone is kind of sad. Christmas time can be happy, but it can also be kind of stressful. So I thought, and people are like sad because it's cold out and the sun isn't out as long. So books to read when you need a good cry sounded like a good idea. So they're all kind of random, but they did make me cry. But they also like made me smile. Like they were really good. Not just sad, but they were really good. Also, I'm on the floor today because I thought this would give you a better view of my books. But anyway, let's get started, shall we? So the first book is actually The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. If you have not read this, you don't know why it made me cry, but if you have read it or you've seen the movie, you can probably guess because the ending, yeah, you know. But this book, if you're not aware, is about a group of teens who live in not the best on like not the best side of town. Like they live kind of on the wrong side of the tracks. Like they're often like teased and bullied because they're what a lot of the people in their town call greasers, which is their nickname because of all the grease that they put in their hair. They think it makes them look cool. It also signifies who they are, and like they're in a gang, and so it signifies like what gang they're with. Um, but yeah, so basically, I don't want to like say too much because it would be really easy to give away like a lot of what happens because it's not very long. But they face a lot of issues because of who they are, and it just that in itself is just really sad because they can't help what they were born into, and they're doing their best to like get out of that situation, but they're a bunch of teenagers. Like I think even like the older characters in the book are like maybe in their like 20s, like they're certainly not even to their mid 20s. So and they have to raise their little brothers and like also basically their little brother's friends and like look out for them and look out for each other. So really sad. Also, if you haven't seen the movie or you have, the author is actually in the movie. I believe she plays a nurse in the hospital scene. So I just thought that was pretty cool. I found that out in high school. The next book that I chose for this video is The Kitchen House. Um, this is a book that is set in at the turn of the 19th century. I read this years and years ago, but it did make me cry, but it also made me smile, and it was just like beautiful. I love reading books like historical fiction. This was just really good. So our main character is a girl named Lavinia, and she is actually an indentured servant. She was on an immigrant ship coming from, I want to say Ireland. I believe she was on an immigrant ship from Ireland, either because her parents put her on the ship and her brother to try to get them away from the poverty in Ireland at the time, or her parents died on the ship, and so she still wound up, in America. So it's set in Virginia and at the turn of the 19th century. Um, but she is an indentured servant, so basically, I believe she has to work for the family for 7 years. So she is 7 at the start of the book, and they free her after 7 years, and so by then she's 14, and they decide to send her to get educated and to become a young lady because she is white, and so they're like, now that you're free and now that you're a young woman, you should, be part of proper society. And especially since she kind of grew up in the house, and so they kind of look at her as family. Um, but yeah, so we follow that journey, and actually we like watch her grow up even more. So after she's 14, we like see her get married, we see her, finish school, we see her have children and everything. But just she's not, some of the circumstances she's put in are just not the best. Like it's a rough life being an indentured servant and growing up out of that. And because she's a servant, she actually lives with um the other slaves, which are not white, they're black, and so she learns a lot about black culture and what it is to be a slave, and that she's like them but also different. And but like the more time that she spends with them, the more she sees them as family along with the white plantation owners. So you can imagine, like, this is just an emotional roller coaster, but it is really good, and it's not super long. Like, it's a quick read. And then the next book that I picked is The Red Tent by Anita Diamant. Um, this is a book. I would say that it could be considered like a Christian book, because it's based in biblical times, but there are some like kind of racy scenes, so maybe not. But it's very historically accurate in my opinion. So this follows um, who is it? Jacob. It follows Jacob's daughter. So that would be Dinah, and she is only like briefly mentioned in the Bible, and it's just like a brief mention. Like I think she gets maybe one verse, and then then it's like basically just to explain her brother's actions. Um, yeah, but the red tent is where the women go when they are menstruating, and it's also where they go when they're giving birth. And so she and her mother and her aunts are midwives, and this is just so beautifully written. It talks about what it is to be a woman, what it is to be a young woman, the like sadness that you feel when you can't save someone's baby as the midwife, and like or and even when you can't save the mother just because of complications, and the fact that they were doing this at home. Like they didn't have hospitals, they didn't have anesthetics or anything. Like they were, you just had to. And so she talks about like losing the mothers and losing the babies. We follow her on her journey into young womanhood, and eventually finding love, and like all the way up until I think she dies of old age. So her whole life, and a little bit about each of her brothers and her mother and her aunts. This is just beautifully written. The descriptions are so beautiful. They talk about like the food that they would make. They talk about making their own beer. They have sheep, so they talk about shearing the sheep and spinning the wool, and when the sheep give birth and all of that stuff. And they explain how Jacob met Dinah's mother and her aunts, because they're actually all his wives. So they explain how that happened, which just makes like the whole story just make more sense. Like the whole story of like Jacob and Joseph, you know, the coat of many colors. Like it just makes everything make more sense. But this was just so beautiful, but it did make me cry. But like I said, like it also made me smile, and it made me laugh, and it was just beautiful. But like again, that emotional roller coaster. So the next one is The People of the Book, excuse me, The People of the Book by Geraldine Brooks. This is um, set in a lot of different places. So the narrator is actually a conservator who contracts out. What that means is that she um, like fixes documents and books and things for museums and other places, and so she contracts out and goes and fixes these things for people. And the people of the book that they're talking about is actually the, excuse me if I say this wrong, the Haggadah, which is the story of the Passover. But this particular one is over 500 years old, and so she is tasked with repairing it. It's clearly very worn out. It has all kinds of like hidden little things in between the pages, like so we like get to read about like her research. Like she finds a moth, and so she figures out what kind of moth it is, and figures out that she has a colleague of hers who studies insects and can tell her like exactly what region this moth is from, like what part of the world, and even like what mountain. And she figures out like what kind of parchment the the pages are, because they're not paper, they're parchment, which means they're made from animal skin. And so she figures that out, and so she traces it to, you know, kind of where it was made, and that was just really cool. She finds like little tiny white hair, and so she has to figure out like what that is. But every time she finds something like that, we read about the journey that the book went on. So where it was made, where it went from there, who like finally to like who painted the illustrations in the book. Like it's just so cool. And uh obviously since it's 500 years old and it is a Jewish book, it survived the Second World War, and it survived the Holocaust. So we get to read about like its journey during that, and like the people who hid it and like kept traveling with it to ensure that it would, you know, get to see future generations. So it was just really, really cool. And obviously, like some of those stories are incredibly sad, but they're also very, very beautiful. So this is definitely worth a read. Um, but yeah, that is all for now. Um, that is certainly not all the books I own that have made me cry, but that is just a few from my recommendations. Um, if you guys like this video, I'll probably do it again. But yeah, that's all for today. So if you enjoyed this, go ahead and hit like and subscribe, and that would be really awesome. So I'll see you again.